Welcome to Value Plays Only, where crop rotation is probably just finding a basic. Today, we have Nick from the Top Deckers playing Thrasios Triton Hero and Tymna the Weaver. This deck leverages two card advantage engines in the command zone to piece together either an infinite mana or Thrasios Oracle win. His hand contains a Birds of Paradise, Chrome Mox, Swan Song, Enlightened Tutor, City Brass, Command Tower, and Boseiju Who Endures. John is playing Narset, Enlightened Exile. This is a graveyard turbo deck built to take advantage of doubling up on powerful spells before closing the game with Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Gamble, Burning Inquiry, Is It Signet, Brain Freeze, Scalding Tarn, Sea of Clouds, and Atraxa, Soaring City. Dan is playing Atraxa, Grand Unifier. This is a big mana food chain deck. It looks to ramp out its commander for massive value, winning with Thrasios Oracle or commander damage. His hand contains a Carpet of Flowers, Mox Opal, Arcane Signet, Wishclaw Talisman, Force Negation, Command Tower, and Gemstone Caverns. Tyler is playing Dargo the Shipwrecker and Tymna the Weaver. This deck looks to loop Dargo with Relic Legends or Brigid and a Sacrifice Outlet, or it can win with Underworld Breach. His hand contains Pyre Heroes, Myrail Shield of Argive, Demonic Tutor, Cabal Ritual, Soul Ring, Burnt Offering, and Mana Confluence. And with that, let's see some value plays. Dan has a pregame action, putting Gemstone Caverns into play, exiling Force Negation. Nick starts things off with a City of Brass as land for turn. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting an offer you can't refuse as it enters. He passes the turn. John plays a Scalding Tarn as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Volcanic Island. He casts everyone's favorite turn 1 play, Burning Inquiry. It resolves and everyone draws 3 and discards 3 cards at random. Happy with his chaotic start, John passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He casts a Mox Opal. He exiles Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand to cast Arcane Signet. He casts Wild Growth, enchanting his Gemstone Caverns. Dan passes the turn. Tyler plays a Polluted Delta as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Badlands. He casts a Soul Ring. He casts Hope of Gyaraper. Tyler passes the turn. In his end step, Nick casts Enlightened Tutor. He searches up a Wishclaw Talisman to the top of his library. The turn then moves to Nick. Nick untaps and draws. He plays Boseiju, Who Endures, as land for turn. He casts a Birds of Paradise. He casts Mystic Remora. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays Atraxa, Soaring City, as land for turn. He casts Steel Enchantment, targeting Remora. Remora triggers and Nick draws. With no answers on hand, Nick watches his advantage slide over to John. John then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays Gaia's Cradle as land for turn. He casts his own Wishclaw Talisman. Remora triggers and John draws. Dan passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He goes to combat and swings Hope at John. He takes the damage. In his second main phase, Tyler casts Pyre of Heroes. Remora triggers and John draws. Pyre resolves and Tyler passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays a Bayou as land for turn. He casts Carpet of Flowers. Remora triggers and John draws. Nick moves to his second main phase and Carpet triggers to add a black mana. He casts Wishclaw Talisman. Remora triggers and John draws. Dan offers to give Nick both Wishclaws on his turn if Nick gives him one now. Nick says no way is Dan getting 2 tutors on his turn. He just passes the turn. John untaps and in his upkeep, he pays to keep Remora. He plays Sea of Clouds as land for turn. John casts Fellwar Stone. He casts an Esper Sentinel. Feeling pretty good about his position, but uneasy about all the tutors everyone else seems to have, John passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He starts politicking again to get his Wishclaw back. No one wants him to have 2 tutors, and the talks go nowhere fast. Dan offers to give Tyler the Wishclaw if he will return it to Dan. In exchange, Dan will not use it again to tutor, but will keep it to get his Mox Opal online. Tyler agrees to this, and Dan activates Wishclaw. He searches up a card in hand and then gives Wishclaw to Tyler. Dan passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He activates Wishclaw, searching up a card in hand and giving Wishclaw to Dan. He plays Command Tower as land for turn. He casts Cabal Ritual. Remora and Esper trigger, and John draws 2. He then sacrifices all 3 of his artifacts to help cast his commander, Dargo the Shipwrecker. He casts Burnt Offering, sacrificing Dargo as an additional cost. Remora triggers and John draws. Tyler adds 5 black mana and 2 red mana. He spends 2 on a Demonic Tutor. Remora triggers and John draws. He searches up a card to hand. Tyler then casts Underworld Breach. Remora triggers and John draws. John now steps in and shows him a Force of Will, paying a life and exiling Rushing River as an additional cost. Tyler looks in despair at his hand as Underworld Breach is countered. He spends some of his mana to recast Dargo the Shipwrecker. He then passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He debates the best way to use his tutor here. John offers that if Nick gives him the Wishclaw, he won't use it for the whole game, to keep Dan and Tyler from getting an extra search. Nick agrees and activates Wishclaw, searching up a card in hand and giving Wishclaw to John. He then casts Ranger Captain of Eos. It enters and triggers to search up a Mockingbird to hand. Nick casts Mockingbird with X equals 0. It enters as a copy of Esper Sentinel. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and in his upkeep he lets his Remora die. He plays a Plateau as land for turn. He casts an Is It Signet. He then casts his commander, Narset, Enlightened Exile. John then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He casts Thrasios Oracle. Tyler begs Dan not to go for it as they may need Ranger Captain for John's turn, but Dan is sure of his plan. John asks Nick to crack the captain here to make Dan put all his spells on the stack. Nick declines, and John offers him an Esper Sentinel draw by exiling Simian Spirit Guide from his hand to cast Lightning Bolt, targeting Ranger Captain. Esper and Prowess trigger. John's creatures get +1/+1, and then Nick draws. In response, Nick cracks his Ranger Captain. Dan responds with a Demonic Consultation. 2 Espers trigger, and John and Nick draw. Nick shows a Mindbreak trap he can't use. John shows a Deflecting Swat that doesn't help. All out of hope, Demonic Consultation resolves. Dan names Emrakul and exiles his whole library. Ranger Captain's ability then resolves, and Lightning Bolt fizzles. Thassa's Oracle then resolves and triggers, and with no library remaining, Dan wins the game. Today, we have a 2-for-1 deal. In this game, Dan is playing Najeela, the Blade Blossom. This 5-color good stuff pile is packed full of wins. In addition to Najeela's specific combos like Derevi and Grim Hireling, it can win with Thassa's Oracle or Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Birds of Paradise, Enlightened Tutor, Flusterstorm, Ad Nauseam, Tundra, Arid Mesa, and Ancient Tomb. Nick is playing Brigid, Clackhan's Heart, aka Brigid, Down's Mind. This is a creature combo deck leveraging Gaia's Cradle in the command zone to pump out an infinite mana win. His hand contains an Arbor Elf, Fyndhorn Elves, Invasion of Ikoria, Force of Vigor, Forest, Savannah, and Lush Portico. John is playing Etali, Primal Conqueror. This deck wins by casting Etali early and often. He can win with Food Chain or any of his opponent's win conditions. His hand contains a Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer, Delighted Halfling, Ruby Medallion, Fury, Desperate Ritual, City Brass, and Ancient Tomb. Tyler is playing Marneus Calgar. This Esper value pile is chock-a-block full of token generators that Marneus turns into card advantage. It can win with Thassa's Oracle or Hullbreaker Horror Loops. His hand contains an Orcish Bowmasters, Snapcaster Mage, Swansong, Cyclonic Rift, Vault of Champions, and Hollowed Fountain. His Luna Mulligan is a Mindbreak Trap. And with that, let's see some value plays. Dan starts things off with an Arid Mesa as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Taiga. He casts a Birds of Paradise. Dan passes the turn. Nick plays a Savannah as land for turn. He casts an Arbor Elf. Nick passes the turn. John plays a City of Brass as land for turn. He takes 1 to cast Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer. Begging Tyler not to have a Bowmaster for all these X1s, he passes the turn. Tyler plays a Hollowed Fountain, into play untap, paying 2 life. He then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays an Ancient Tomb as land for turn. He casts his commander, Najeela, the Blade Blossom. Dan passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He plays a Forest as land for turn. He taps out for his commander, Brigid, Clackhan's Heart. It enters and triggers to make a token. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He goes to combat and swings Ragavan at Tyler. He takes the damage, and Ragavan triggers to make a treasure and exile Silence off the top of Tyler's library. In his second main phase, John plays Ancient Tomb as land for turn. He casts Ruby Medallion. He then casts Delighted Halfling. John looks at his hand and back at the board. He wants to make sure he gets another turn and invokes Fury, exiling Delayed Blast Fireball as an alternate cost. It resolves and triggers, triggering to sacrifice and triggering to deal 2 to Najeela and 2 to Brigid. Both commanders die, and Fury sacrifices himself. John then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a Vaulted Champions as land for turn. He casts Tataru Taru. It enters and triggers, targeting Nick. They both draw, and Tataru triggers to make a tap treasure. Tyler then passes the turn. In his end step, Dan casts Enlightened Tutor. It resolves, and he searches up Aristic Study to the top of his library. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a Tundra as land for turn. He casts Aristic Study. There's a lot of groaning from the table, but it resolves. Dan then passes the turn. In his end step, Nick casts Force of Vigor, exiling Endurance as an alternate cost, targeting Ristic and Ruby Medallion. Ristic triggers and Dan draws. Dan hems and haws for a while about this, but ultimately it resolves. The turn then moves to Nick. Nick untaps and draws. He plays Lush Portico as land for turn, into play tapped. It triggers to Surveil, putting Vivian, Monster's Advocate, into the grave. He casts Fyndhorn Elves. He taps out for a Grand Abolisher. Everyone sits up a bit straighter as it resolves. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He goes to combat swinging Ragavan at Dan. He takes the damage, and Ragavan triggers to make a treasure and exile Worldly Tutor off the top of his library. In his second main phase, John casts Wild Growth, targeting his City Brass. It resolves, and John casts Desperate Ritual. Dan responds with a Flusterstorm, with 2 extra Storm copies. Ritual is countered, and John then casts Worldly Tutor from exile, searching up a Treasonous Ogre to the top of his library. He then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays Otawara, Soaring City as land for turn. He casts an Arcane Signet. Tyler passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a Bayou as land for turn. He casts an Ignoble Hierarch. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond. Dan then passes the turn, with a boatload of mana held up. Nick untaps and draws. He plays Marsh Flats as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Temple Garden, into play untap, paying 2 life. He recasts his commander, Brigid, Clackhan's Heart. It enters and triggers to make a token. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He goes to combat swinging Ragavan at Dan. Dan really debates blocking here, but knowing the Etali is coming either way, he opts to not lose his board. Dan takes the damage, and Ragavan triggers to make a treasure and exile an offer you can't refuse off the top of his library. In his second main phase, John casts Treasonous Ogre. It resolves, John pays 18 life to help cast his commander, Etali, Primal Conqueror. It enters and triggers, exiling Amphibian Downpour, the One Ring, Giver Runes, and Cursed Mirror. John casts all the spells, with Downpour and its 5 storm copies frogging the Arbor Elf, Grand Abolisher, Brigid, Birds, Ignoble, and Tataru. Dan floats a black mana with Birds, and then they all resolve. In response to Cursed Mirror, Tyler steps in here with a Swords to Plowshares, targeting Etali. John responds with an Offer You Can't Refuse from Exile. Tyler responds with a Swan Song. Offer is countered and John makes a 2/2 bird. Then Etali is exiled and John gains 7 life. Seeing his Cursed Mirror can become a Grand Abolisher, Dan responds here with an Ad Nauseam. It resolves and Dan starts revealing. He reveals a Marsh Flats, Tinderwall, Tarnished Citadel, Lotho Corrupt Sheriff, Drannith Magistrate, Underground Sea, Scrubland, Semut Vizier of Noctamoon, Swan Song, Exotic Orchard, Pact to Negation, Brain Freeze, Simian Spirit Guide, Red Elemental Blast, Bloodstained Mire, Chrome Mox, Mana Vault, Neoform, Volcanic Island, Esper Sentinel, Noble Hierarch, Mystical Tutor, City of Traders, and Savine's Reclamation, deciding to stop there. Cursed Mirror then resolves as a copy of Grand Abolisher. Giver Runes then enters. The One Ring resolves and John gains protection from everything. He taps the ring to draw a card. John pays 9 life into Treasonous Ogre to cast Wandering Archaic to hopefully make it through Dan's turn. John then passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He casts a Mana Vault. Tyler asks if John will spare Maragavan hit if he goes after Dan. John agrees and Tyler goes to combat, swinging his frog at Dan. Dan takes the damage, and Tyler passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Miscast as it enters. He takes 2 to cast Mana Vault. John's 2/2 bird licks his chops. He plays an Exotic Orchard as land for turn. He casts Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. Everyone really questions this as it resolves. Dan then casts Neoform, sacrificing Lotho as an additional cost. Archaic triggers and John copies Neoform, searching up the Cabbage Merchant to the battlefield. Neoform resolves and Dan searches up a Derevi to the battlefield. It triggers to untap Taiga. He exiles Simian Spirit Guide from his hand to help cast Semut, Vizier of Noctamoon. Dan sacrifices Lion's Eye Diamond and discards his hand to add 3 red mana. He casts his commander, Najeela, the Blade Blossom. Tyler gives all the pieces on Dan's board a good read, and it resolves. Dan very cautiously heads to combat. He swings both frogs and Samut at Tyler. Najeela triggers to make a 1/1 warrior, tapped and attacking Tyler. Tyler takes the damage. Derevi triggers 4 times and Samut triggers twice to draw. In response, Tyler flashes in an Orcish Bowmasters here. It enters and triggers to ping Ragavan, killing it. Dan then draws 2, and Bowmaster triggers twice to ping Dan, killing him. In Dan's Phantom End step, Nick channels Boseiju, who endures, targeting the Amphibian Downpour, enchanting his commander. Since John controls this, he searches up a commercial district, into play tapped, triggering to surveil Nature's Rhythm into his grave. The turn then moves to Nick. Nick untaps and draws. In his first main phase, he pays to transform Brigid. He plays Verdant Catacombs as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Dryad Arbor. He taps Brigid for 6 white and then casts Archdruid's Charm, choosing Tutor mode, Archaic and Cabbage Man trigger. John makes a food and then copies Charm, searching up a Hellkite Courser to hand. Tyler and Nick start talking here, and Tyler says he can stop this, but then he won't have anything held up for John's turn, which means they'll likely just lose on the spot. Nick says if Tyler lets it resolve, they can pick the creature together. This works for Tyler, and Charm resolves, searching up a Ranger Captain of Eos to Nick's hand. He then casts Ranger Captain of Eos. It enters and triggers, searching up a Seed Cradle Witch to hand, ringing all the remaining alarm bells. Nick then passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays Mana Confluence as land for turn, staring at all of his pain lands in the face of Treasonous Ogre. He casts Hellkite Courser. It enters and triggers to put Etali into play. Etali triggers. Nick debates cracking Ranger Captain here, but lets it resolve. Etali exiles Mox Diamond, Voice of Victory, and Worldly Tutor. He casts Voice and Tutor. Tutor resolves, searching up Rionia, Fire Dancer, to the top of his library. John then goes to combat, swinging Etali and Archaic at Tyler. He takes 11, and John passes the turn, returning Etali to the command zone in the end step. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays a Polluted Delta as land for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Tundra. He casts his commander, Marneus Calgar. Tyler then passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He floats 7 green mana from Brigid. He sacrifices Ranger Captain of Eos. Tyler responds here with a Snapcaster Mage. It enters and triggers, targeting Swords to Plowshares to gain flashback. He casts Swords targeting Brigid. Archaic and Cabbage Man trigger. John makes a food and then copies Swords targeting Fyndhorn Elves. Nick floats 1 with his elves, and then both creatures are exiled and he gains 4. Ranger Captain's ability then resolves, locking out Nick's opponents this turn. He casts Invasion of Ikoria with X equals 4. Cabbage Man triggers to make a food. Invasion resolves and searches up a Breakglass Gearhulk to the battlefield. It triggers to search up a Walking Ballista and Curion Ranger to hand. He then taps out to recast his commander, Brigid, yet again, and it triggers to make a token. With that, Nick passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He harmonizes nature's rhythm with X equals 6 to search up a roaming throne, naming Dinosaur as it enters. He then casts Rionia, Fire Dancer. He goes to combat, and Rionia triggers to make 2 copies of Hellkite Courser. Both new Hellkites trigger. The first resolves, putting Etali from the command zone into play. It triggers twice through Throne. He exiles Born Upon a Wind, Orcish Lumberjack, and Elvish Mystic, casting them all. John draws and Bowmaster triggers to ping him for 1. The next trigger then resolves, exiling Lotus Petal, Boreal Druid, and Soul Ring, casting them all. Sadly, the second Hellkite Courser ability fizzles as Etali is already in play. John goes to combat, swinging 3 Hellkites and Etali at Nick. Nick takes 19, and John passes the turn, cleaning up his temporary token mess. Tyler untaps and draws. He casts Kumbal, Profiteering Mayor. John looks at his life total and does a big gulp. Tyler goes to combat and swings his Orc Army at Nick. He takes the damage. In the second main phase, Tyler casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting Brigid. Archaic and Cabbage Man trigger. John makes a food and Kumbal triggers to make a tap food. Kumbal and Marneus trigger. Tyler draws and pings everyone for 1. Archaic then copies Cyclonic Rift, bouncing Kumbal back to hand. Tyler then passes the turn. Nick untaps and draws. He recasts his commander, Brigid, Clackhan's Heart. It triggers to make a token. He then casts Curion Ranger. He then passes the turn. In his end step, John pays into one of his foods to gain 3 life. John untaps and draws. He pays a life and uses Orcish Lumberjack to help cast his commander, Etali, Primal Conqueror. It triggers twice through Roaming Throne. The first trigger exiles Enlightened Tutor, Esper Sentinel, and Pyrokinesis. He casts Tutor and Pyrokinesis, targeting Bowmaster, Curion, and Brigid. Enlightened Tutor then puts Food Chain on top of his library. At this point, the table sees the writing on the wall. With Food Chain and Throne and Rionia and everything else that's going on, the table don't feel like watching the next 20 minutes play out and scoop it up. And with that, John wins the game. So, what do we learn today? Being the police may keep the game going, but being next in turn order after the main villain is the real way to win. If you have any tips for the video, leave them below. Subscribe if you feel like it. Until next time, keep making value plays.
What if you just go get a rock or something?
Yeah, and I won't use it.
I'm
happy to be the garbage pit for Wish Claws.
No.
I don't want anyone tutoring.
No.
Force of Will was from my Burning Inquiry. I've had it like the whole game. And I've seen a lot of Wish Claws come and go that I've been like, man, I don't want these.
So who feels bad for me wants to cross my wish claw? See, if you just push, people will be...
Can I just have a little Dargo fodder, please?
Yeah, guys.
I'm just going to draw it out of your hand. I'm going to play a Thrasios Oracle.
What an absolute monkey. Dan, you fucking
I was
monkey.
thinking about the seat order. It is convenient because you guys have both your seats.
Do you have something for this, John?
Not for Thassa. I mean, I already used Force of Will.
My bad. I thought you said you had Fluster. That's
I have
crazy.
SWAT,
No way.
but I can't, and he showed me a card, but I can't, like, get it.
Mindbreak trap.
I can't get it online.
I have to.
You're breaking my heart.
I'm sorry. I know how powerful Rhystic Study is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah.
best card in the format.
Yeah.
It needs to go.
Yeah. You got to draw out of it, isn't it sick?
Yeah. Think about the value that your 3 mana just gave you.
Wow, I can't. Dan, if you have a counter and you're not using it, that's some solid trigger discipline.
Yeah.
Tell you what.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Solid.
That's what it is.
Boom.
Mana.
Holy tutor.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good.
I might use that once I get countered this turn. Honestly, leave that there.
Yeah.
There's a strong chance I use it.
Tap?
That's crazy.
Welcome to Bird Hell.
Holy.
You want to tap?
Yo, Dan's dead.
Alright, float 1.
We're eating good, boys.
For a mana vault. I guess I'll put this up here.
Dead.
Okay.
That's why I was like waiting. I was like, I bet Dan plays Sam at this turn, and
Yeah.
I get him on the board.
Yeah.
I had other options,
Yeah.
but I was like,
No,
I
honestly,
think
it's
this
good
seems
value.
That was good.
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Now you have blockers for
Right.
me and everything. It's net positive.
You
Yeah.
You get anything.
I know, and I think me getting some value and you stopping him is better than me saying like let it go and I'm gonna try and like
Do
jam.
you want to
something.
get like a value piece instead of something that's like insta win?
Yeah, we can look together if you want.
I'm fair with that.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm playing.
Yeah, but now see he has all the counters. He's gonna
I'm
make
playing
his
for
progress.
me, baby.
Yeah. He doesn't ever have to do anything.
All right, so we're getting a creature.
So glad I'm playing for John to win here. This is great.
Again, for the 3rd time in a row, I will get 1 trigger.
You'll
That's the
eventually
first
get
one.
there.
The less players, it gets less likely.
2.
And every turn I have less and less life from these goddamn lands.
Snapcaster.
Whoa.
I'll target swords.
This guy plays some sick shit.
Damn, the one card I exiled. That's crazy. You know, I had a Veil.
Ooh.
And
But not as
On
blue or black.
Yeah.
Snapcaster's blue.
No, it
But-
gives him hexproof for blue and black.
Oh, but
Yeah.
but
It's
yours
white,
is
yeah.
Yeah, it's white. I was banking on any counter spell.
Yeah.
Not a Snapcaster Mage.
I know.
Yeah, baby.
Later.
Yeah, I literally went into that turn thinking I'm gonna psych-rip the whole board and kill John.
Yeah.
And then I looked at my mana. I'm like, I don't have mana vault anymore, dude. I'm so weak.
Etali trigger. We all flip again.
I'm good.
I am.
Yeah,
good.
I mean,
We
I
have
could just,
so
I
much
could just,
crap.
I
Yeah.
just keep eating them to food
Yeah.
chain, but I feel
Yeah.
like
I
you're
think
under
you're-
voice of
You'll
victory.
get
I'm
the
not that worried
squee
about it.
and like, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just keep doing it 100 times. Yada yada yada.